told that it never happened. It's happened at least twice.
What's this?
I was afraid this last time we did, that it was trash and they were like,
Well, why don't you take, punks are those, punks are punks.
yeah.
Too much time on our hands.
Ready to go
You
live?
gotta follow
I'm ready.
along here.
Are you ready?
It's no fun being at the party without the party favors.
Yeah, right.
Are we live? There's a lot of.
We're live.
Memories.
We're live.
We are going to call the budget meeting to order. We're going to stand and say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For the benefit of the audience, this is a committee of the whole meeting for the budget. Tonight we're going to look at the general fund, the liquid fuels fund, and the capital account. You have your information in front of you. There's nobody here except my wife and Mr. Corey, but there will be no public comment except on the budget tonight at all, should somebody come late. I believe there's a PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, so Cordova and I put together a quick presentation to just kind of go over some of the highlights of this year, since there's much that is unchanged, but there's some things that we're going to accomplish and we're proud of. So I'll run through this quick and then.
But, I'm sorry, before we start, I want to note for the record that Ms. Johnson has an excused absence, Ms. Graham has an excused absence, and Mr. Ruff has an excused absence.
Okay. All right, so first, general fund, everybody's favorite. So highlights for 2023, we'll start with revenues since that's always the good news. No tax increase, so we've, no real estate tax increase. We've had a decrease in vehicle code violations, so some of the still lingering post-COVID impacts, so we had a reduction in that. We did have a very good year with interest on our investments through Pliget. So we are upping that budget amount to $15,000 for next year. The Cordova does a fine job of moving things around in short-term investments with the Pliget fund, and that's obviously been very fruitful for us. Some of the grant revenue, the Conservation District, we're going to carry over that $30,000. We were awarded that $257K from CDBG. We still are working through the MTF grant, that $1 million for Broadway, so that'll still be encumbered in the next year. And then we're going to try again for the casino grant to try and purchase the police car, and hopefully we get it. Some other revenue highlights, the inspection fees for doing the fire and life safety in-house is a $12,000 line item. Rental inspections, almost $21,000. Our cooperative payback from Benecon is anticipated $81,162, and we are going to replace 2 vehicles. So the sale of those 2 vehicles, we're guessing somewhere in the neighborhood of $12,000. All right, now on to expenditures. So $3,000, the line item was adjusted for the general code to update our codified ordinances online, get everything up to date, and put our subdivision and land development ordinance, which is not currently online. We're doing that this year. It's a pretty sizable document, so that's pretty expensive, but we're going to try and get everything updated and online. Computerization costs, so our IT provider, Microsoft Office, ESRI portion for the general fund is the GIS system for the mapping, and has all our data stored for water, sewer, whatnot. That's split between general fund, sewer fund, and stormwater authority. Nixle is the desired notification provider. If we lock in with them, we'll sign the quote. It's a letter of intent. We'll start 1/1/23. We won't get billed till January of 23, but they actually knock $200 off the annual fee if we sign. So as long as no one has any objections as we go through the budget process here, I think it's probably safe to. signed a quote and saved us $600 over 3 years. And then again, we're splitting that with Stormwater Authority and sewer because you use notification software for all of those functions as well. Professional services decreased because we have ended the.
Before you get to that, I do want to highlight for the computerization that our fees for Keystone Technology, that's our third-party provider, am I loud enough? Okay, have gone down a lot because Eric really, I don't know, was able to do a lot of things himself. So really that saved us quite a bit of money.
I'm in-house IT, so pretty much everybody comes to me, and then I only have to punt very, very minor things or
So-
very little things to
Right.
Keystone.
So even adding the other services like the mapping system and the alerting system, we were still below last year's budget because we dropped Keystone fees quite. So just wanted to highlight that.
That's good news.
Yep.
Yeah, my rate's considerably lower than the $50 an hour they charge. And then there's a one-time purchase that is going to bump up the police minor equipment from $5,000 to $7,000 just for 2023, and that is for a printer that ties into their records management system so they can barcode evidence. Obviously, we've had enough significant police matters over the last several years that we want to be on the cutting edge with technology. So again, one-time expense, and then it's just labels from here on out for that. Some other expenditures, the capital purchase of a police cruiser, the fire uniform account was up to $10,000 because they've got some new members and some aging turnout gear, and you're looking at anywhere from $2,400 to $3,000 depending on the spec for a set of turnout gear. They do buy some of it with relief, but we upped it a little bit next year because we can to help them replace some of that. The cost for doing the fire inspections in-house with Ray is $1,800 is what we're budgeting for that based on the amount of hours and the amount of businesses that are out there, and they're every 2 years, so it's pretty much 50% of the businesses in the borough. Public Works, we're going to replace the pickup truck with a new F-250 that we can hopefully get. Winter maintenance supplies, you'll see it's zeroed out in the general fund because we're moving salt to liquid fuels, and when we get to liquid fuels, I'll touch on why we did that. And then street repair, so Sioux Street's got a component that, again, we'll touch on in the capital projects, but Sioux Street has a component that is general fund. Jeter obviously is reimbursed by the CDBG grant. The Stanley Grass Alley, there's part of it's grant funded through the conservation grant. Part of it will be stormwater if we elect to do the full scale of the project, and then part of it will just be made out of the general fund. And then the curb and sidewalk project for Broadway, again, reimbursed by the MTF grant, and then we approved the ARPA for the overages. Some of the other expenditures, the demolition of one of those park houses that we acquired that have been sitting up there for a number of years, they need to come down. They're in disrepair, and they're not at the point they're a hazard yet, but they're going to be a hazard, so we'll look at that in the capital plan a little bit further as what our 3-year plan for up there is. Debt service is decreasing, which is a good thing because the loan for Public Works Garage paid off this year. So that's, how much did that drop us, Cordula? What was that debt service annually?
There was
Roughly.
so principal plus the interest, roughly 10,000. It had dropped quite a bit because we had paid off a large amount of that loan from the RCAP, but there was still some money left over,
So that's out this year. With the ongoing negotiation, we have budgeted for the increase borough portion of the MMO if the employee contribution drops from 8% to 4% for the police pension fund. So again, we're in negotiations. That's not set in stone, but I'd rather budget the money so it's there and plan on it occurring. The employee benefits, again, a big cost. The renewal increase this year for Benetcon 2.3. We did a cursory shop around, and we're really not going to do any better than Benetcon. So for what we get, it's actually very, very competitive co-op. And then wage increase for employees. So we used a figure that's been for both police and public works that have been like around something we've educated guests based on our negotiations so far. Probably on the high end again. I'd rather encumber the money there, and if we have to, if we don't spend it all, then that's a good thing. And finally, we are recommending the transfer of $250,000 to capital reserve in next year's budget. So the unrestricted, the minimum unrestricted fund balance, 50% of expenditures minus capital projects. So 521,998, and so we're talking about putting another 250 in there on top of the 505,891. Which is, this is not our rainy day fund. This is our capital reserve for future projects. So while we're able to, I think that's a good place to put it in, and then that can eliminate the need to take loans and have future debt service for certain projects. So we can afford to do it. We're not increasing taxes. We've encumbered as much of the anticipated expenses as we can on the high end, and we're still able to put the 250 in there. So that's what we're recommending.
If I can just add, when I first joined council, I went to a new members seminar, and that's one of the things they said, to fund it, keep funding it, and don't ever let another council take it out in lieu of a tax increase.
Yeah, and like I said, this is a good year for it, with where we're at with the budget and some of the, we're still accomplishing a lot of work, as we'll talk through in the capital projects, but we also have the ability to put this money away.
Before we get to liquid fuels, let's talk about the elephant in the room. What are we doing with the pool?
That is a excellent question. So right now, Cordula, you want to go over what you budgeted for the pool as it sits right now?
So, of course, we don't have anything on the revenue side. Let's just look. Do you want to see what the sold in 21 that was really the last one?
No, I guess the
What do we got?
threshold question is, are we going to try to open the pool next year? Are we going to continue just to maintain it so it doesn't deteriorate? If we do try to open the pool next year, my recollection is we need about $90,000 to $100,000 worth of work, short term, and a lot more longer term. Mr. Corey, is that correct? Is my recollection correct?
I'd have to check the notes, honestly.
So what we have in the budget as it is presented to you, and you all have the general fund detailed worksheet that is everything under recreation expenditure code 452. So you'll find that I really haven't changed anything in terms of chemicals, supplies, minor equipment. That's all under the assumption that the pool is kind of open and you need to keep those, keep it open, right, Jason, to not have it deteriorate any further. The only thing that we carried forward is that estimate that we had taken into consideration last year of $50,000 for pipe and electric repairs in the pool deck. So I carried that over into this budget too. If we want to change that, then that's a different story.
I think based on the delay for getting contractors, depending on when we make the decision if we're going to do the work, I don't see the pool deck getting done until 2023, and then we'd have a better estimate and budget the funds in 23. I think within that 50,000, we would do the most necessary repairs. If council decides to try and open it this year, we would do the most imminent repairs to make it safe and functional out of that 50,000 balance, which may not even be that much, but I don't think we're going to get the contractor in to do that caulking just because of their busy schedule.
And when do we have to make a decision by, if the decision is to open the pool? Do do we need, is there a deadline date we have to know on or before, say, January 1st, or, did you follow my question?
I do, absolutely. You need to make a decision as soon as possible if you plan on doing any of that work. And the answer to your question about $90,000 is, maybe you can explain to him, or he probably already knows, but maybe you could explain better. That $90,000, we can only spend up to $21,000 or $22,000, correct? Before it has to go out to bid, and then it goes to Davis Bacon wages and whatever.
So, I mean, the concrete work alone was over the threshold for the bid.
Well, yeah, but I remember reading a memo, which I think you put together, that the short-term work, and it was an estimate, of course. The short-term work was about 60 to 80,000, as I recall. Does anybody else?
Yeah, it was in the PowerPoint I put together for the pool meeting. Yeah. So, and again, I mean, those numbers are like, everything is expensive.
Well, that was then, and obviously prices and costs have gone up. So, but in terms of
Decisions should be made sooner than later, because if you're scheduling contractors, you can't get anybody to even answer their phone.
I know 3 of our members are not here tonight, but anybody object to putting that on for discussion for the November meeting? Phil, do you have any objections, Phil?
I guess not.
Well, it's just to put it on, it's not, the only thing we're deciding tonight is whether to put it on the November agenda. All right, so can you put that on the November agenda, please?
Yep, I will put that, and then we will, for the time being, we're just going to leave those, again, the money's in there, it doesn't affect, we're still putting money in capital reserve,
Sure.
so I'd rather leave it earmarked there, and then when we make a decision, if we don't spend it all, then it carries over, and, we'll figure out what to do with it as we decide a long-term strategy for the pool.
That works for me. And we have sufficient wages set aside for the parks?
We do. We up the parks based on what our actual spend was for this year, because obviously I think the big reason for the success and the amount of employees was the fact that we were paying a very competitive wage, but you really can't walk that back. So
No.
So, and I think there was the overwhelming feedback justifies that expense, so that is incorporated in here, and really in the grand scheme of things, in a $4-point-something million budget, it's a very small expense.
All right, I didn't mean to cut you off. Are there any questions on the general fund? Because I think Mr. Grantz wanted to move on to liquid fuels. Any questions?
Yeah, I know you all just got it tonight, so I mean, certainly we can obviously go back to this. The next meeting's to go over the other proprietary funds, but certainly if you find something that we can discuss any of that at those meetings. So, but again, at any point tonight, if you want me to jump back, we can do that. I just kind of tried to cover everything in this PowerPoint in a flow for tonight.
Seeing and hearing no questions, let's talk about liquid fuels.
All right, so purchases and projects for 2023. So we moved road salt from general fund because that's a qualifying expense under liquid fuels. Liquid fuels obviously gets audited. You have to work with the PennDOT regional guy. There's a lot of rules. There's a lot of nuances. It's a lot more of a pain than spending general fund money out of line items. So what we did was we moved the road salt expense because that is just a flat qualifying expense for liquid fuels. So that frees up that money in our general fund, which we're actually going to use for road projects here, because there are some materials for alleys that we could get cheaper if we're not buying from somebody who has to be a PennDOT approved supplier. So Jason can make the money go further, get more alleys done. So we just did a switcheroo there. We moved salt to liquid fuels, and then we took the money for local forces, which paves out, for Jason's guys to pave alleys, and we moved that to general fund, so there's less controls on that. Sioux Street reconstruction, that was a carryover. We intended on doing it this year, but then with the estimates or the costs coming in higher than the estimates for the other projects, we pushed that off to 23, so that is planned, and it desperately needs it. Delaware Avenue microsurfacing was what was going to occur, and then we had the sketchy weather forecast, and some planning concerns with St. Luke's, and we pushed it back. Of course, we ended up with nice weather, but who knew it wasn't what was forecasted. So that will be done next year. That is 100% funded out of liquid fuels, so we're carrying that money from this year over to cover that. The Public Works alley paving, there is still some out of liquid fuels. We had upped it to 30 this year. So what we did was we kept 20 in for liquid fuels, and then that 10 that we switched with the salt will come out of general fund then, so we can buy certain materials out of there to supplement that. And then 20K for crack sealing and pothole repair. And that pretty much eats up our liquid fuels allotment for next year.
Is that list there pretty much all the road work that we're gonna focus on next year?
There's a couple more. We'll get to the last slides, go over the capital plan. So I'll give you 3 years of planned road work, including next year. But that is some of it. That's just what's getting funded out of liquid fuels.
That's quite a bit there.
Any other questions on that? Seeing and hearing none, let's move
What
on.
we're saying, that it has to go through PennDOT to get approved for.
No, liquid fuels purchases have to get approved by PennDOT. The general fund does not. No. Liquid fuels has a bunch of rules, and it's PennDOT's money they're giving us, so we have to play by PennDOT's rules. And sometimes they're clear as mud.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions, liquid fuels? It's a pretty simple one. Even more simple, the ARPA fund. So this was a rescue plan money. We got the second tranche of that this year. As council had approved at, I think 2 or 3 meetings ago, 223,000 of that is gonna make up the overage of the Broadway curb and sidewalk project above and beyond the $1 million MTF grant. So that's going towards, they're all infrastructure projects. That's what we had indicated we were going to use the ARPA money for. So Broadway storm sewer from the first tranche that was given to Stormwater Authority for upgrades, that $166K to do the storm sewer improvements along with the curb and sidewalk project will be paid out of that money. And then the Hofford Street storm sewer, which will be in the budget for Stormwater Authority for next year, is estimated at 46,000, and I think that's conservative. It's probably going to be a little bit more than that, but we do have enough money in the ARPA fund to cover that as well. So there's still a little bit of a fund balance in there, and we have till 2024 to allocate it and 26 to spend it. So we'll see when all these projects are complete what that balance actually is, and then we'll figure out what else. I mean, we can use it for anything infrastructure, so the possibilities are pretty endless. But that's that. That's its own fund, just because it has, for tracking purposes, so we can report on it. So I just wanted to touch on that. But again, that money's really going towards projects that are funded elsewhere or Stormwater Authority.
Just as an addition, based on these expenditures that are planned to be funded through the ARPA funds, we'll have approximately $40,000 left. So even if there were overages on those, they would be safe to be covered and potentially something smaller in addition.
Thank you. Were there any questions on that? It was fairly straightforward. Okay. The last shot is capital projects.
Yep, so our capital budget, we did one of the things that I wanted to institute this year. Ideally, I'd like to go to a 5-year plan, but we took baby steps and we started with 3. So we're gonna touch on, obviously, what's coming up in 23, and then our plans for 24 and 25 to give you a picture of where we're going with large purchases, equipment, infrastructure, and what we're forecasting there. So we did not change to a capital fund this year yet. That's up for discussion potentially for next year. But what we did do in the plan is, there's a separate capital plan that lists all the big ticket items, pretty much anything over $5,000, projects, equipment, and whatnot. And then we list the funding source there. So yes, some of it is funded out of the general fund, some of it is funded out of liquid fuels, but you'll see how much from which fund based on the capital plan. So although it's not its own fund, which would involve us making that, if we want to do that, it's just an extra step where we would take that money from the general fund and liquid fuels every year, transfer it into that, and then it's just its own fund. I think it's just as easy and just as clear if we list all the capital expenses and then just list the funding source of where it's coming from. So for equipment for 23, police cruiser, which is ordered, but the payment's not due, the first payment's not due until 2023. We took a 5-year loan on that because the yield curve's inverse right now because the economy is bizarre, and it was a lower interest rate to take 5 years than it was to take 1 year. So we do have the option. I don't foresee having an issue paying it off. It's simple interest. We'll only pay 1 year of interest on it. But we do have the option to take it out if we need to 5 years. The fire department pickup truck was approved and budgeted for in 2022. And then I got a phone call 2 weeks ago from our dealer who said that they got a letter from Ford saying, yeah, we didn't get to your truck this year. You can reorder for 2023. We're not holding your price. So my guess is, and this is purely speculative, but they make more money off retail vehicles than they do government and fleet purchases. So I'm guessing whatever parts they were rationing and triaging out to projects went to retail. And so they allege that it's going to be built before any of the other orders, ours and a number of others that didn't get built. But in any case, we still have the money in the fire fund to pay for it, which is the funding source for that. We took the, we added the money for the whatever the new price increase is, but it's not going to get any cheaper next year, so it doesn't really behoove us to hold off any longer. And then finally, the F-350 pickup truck at Public Works is due for replacement. Jason feels comfortable with a F-250. We have not gotten, Ford won't release their pricing till tomorrow or Friday for 2023. So this is a best guess estimate. So there might be some fluctuation between the pickup truck for the fire department, for their new brush truck, and the Public Works pickup, but that's where we're at right now. For projects, construction projects funded out of capital, the Sioux Street reconstruction, $208,000. That is a blend of liquid fuels and general fund. Jeter Avenue, CDBG, funding with the grant. The Delaware Avenue Preservation Project, which was again pushed back from this year, that is 100% liquid fuels funded. That'll be the microsurfacing. And then the Stanley, the alley between Stanley and Russell, if we do convert it to the grass, we have $30,000 that is the conservation grant. There's a general fund portion, and then the stormwater improvements would be funded by the Stormwater Authority. So there's the breakdown of what those would cost. So those are budgeted for this year. Additionally, there's the curb and sidewalk project. So there's your breakdown. General fund, 1.1, $1 million of that is covered by the grant. ARPA's covering $233.46, and the Stormwater Authority is paying for the stormwater improvements to the tune of $166,240. The Hofford Street Storm Sewer Extension, that's funded with ARPA funds, and it is a Stormwater Authority project, but because it's ARPA funds, we included it in our capital plan. That's estimated at $46,687, and you just heard Cordula say that we've got about $40,000 left in there, so if that thing comes back over that budgeted number, which I suspect it will, we do have some room there without having to tap into it, but the Stormwater Authority has funds as well. So, and then we are starting to tackle streets. So for this year, it will be Dorothy Avenue, the mill and overlay. Our estimate based on the last price we got for mill and overlay at $22 a square yard. It's a yard, right? Square
Yes.
29.5 of that will be out of general fund, and 20,000 we have in liquid fuels left to commit to that project. So Dorothy was the one that Jason picked to do for 2023. And then planning for years 2 and 3. So next year we're going to take down one of the park houses, $22,000 for the demolition estimate for that. 2024 would be the demolition of the second house, and then then we would like to construct a pole building, which is allowed with the program that we acquired the land under, to store the, move like the mowers out of the pool building, so we're not storing gas with pool chemicals, and have different equipment up there to care for the park. Plus, we are using some of those houses for storage. So we would need, before we demolish both of them, we would need someplace to go with some of the stuff. So Jason got a price on a pole building that we could build up there, and then that would have all the equipment for maintaining the park in there and whatever other storage we need. So that's planned for $60,000. Roosevelt Mill and Overlay, $60,000. Again, a combination of general fund and liquid fuels, depending on where our balances are in liquid fuels. Lackawacky Mill and Overlay would be 2024 as well. Police car, I'm guessing about $55,000. Again, we'll try for the grant, but we haven't been overly successful the last 2 or 3 years now, the way that since they changed the funding formula and who gets them. Potentially a big dump truck at $250,000 to replace one of the Internationals. Those are getting up there. We just had extensive body work done to combat rust on the older one. So we're limping by, and we're doing what we need to. And the mileage is low, but obviously that's not necessarily a good indicator, given we're such a small borough. We don't put a lot of mileage on, but it's still a lot of wear and tear on the trucks. And then one of the Gravely mowers would be replaced in 2024, and that's $10,000. Moving on to 25, looking at Herzog Mill and Overlay, that's 66. Brighton Mill and Overlay, and again, we had a discussion with St. Luke's about them potentially doing Long Street on their own and managing the project and getting their own contractor, and they would just, we would, obviously they would work with our engineer and Jason to make sure everything's done to standard, but they're talking about doing all of Ostrom Street. Yeah, what did I say? Oh, yeah, sorry, Ostrom. And then, so along with that, that stretch of Brighton Street going down towards the pump house is in need of repair. Right now, it's got a big hole in it from Bethlehem Water for weeks, and it's not open. But eventually, when they fix it, then we'd like to mill and overlay that as well. And then another police car, just to keep us on a good replacement cycle. Obviously, we'll think of more things for 25, but just looking now and starting to anticipate our needs and talking to Jason about the roads that we need to tackle that we can't do on our own, and get on a replacements or a rehab schedule where we can still mill and overlay them before we're digging them out like we have to on Sioux Street, because it's just beyond that is key. So that's why I wanted to build those in that plan. And that is all I have for the highlights.
All right. Are there any questions regarding anything we've talked about so far? Everybody, I know we just got this information tonight, but upon first glance, is everybody comfortable with it? Or is there any other item of business?
No, and I just want to highlight that, obviously we certainly wanted to not even come close to talking about a tax increase and build our capital reserve and our fund balance, but we're also trying to tackle a lot of the infrastructure that's aging here in the borough. So, we're spending the money on things to improve the borough as much as we can as we go forward here, but also be as fiscally responsible as possible.
All right, without there being any further business, do you have anything to say? Anything to add? Jason, do you have anything to add? All right, I would remind the viewers who are watching us live or via podcast, our next budget meeting is next Wednesday night, also at 6 o'clock. I believe it's November 2nd. It'll be here in Borough Hall.
Before we adjourn,
Yes.
can I ask a non-budget related question?
Sure.
A citizen came to me
Sure.
about this. The hosey up there, he walked up and he continues to see it kind of deteriorate. And he's wondering that this job was approved. So where are we at, or who was doing what up there to move that along, put it that way?
So the developer has stalled with starting, they had indicated they were gonna start demolition in the winter, early spring. And then I suspect that some of his other ventures have consumed his time and capital. So we have no news right now. I did talk to Dave Berger about reaching out to Irv McLean, who's kind of been their attorney and their point of contact, to try and get us an update. But the last time we had talked to them about this, we boarded up the property, some kids broke in, and we sent them the bill for it, and they paid it, but they did not have an anticipated start date at that point.
They have a lot of things on those. They have issues.
Yeah, he's having a cash flow problem.
So, it's a cash flow thing, okay.
Yeah, with the developer, that's correct.
All right, this is not a formal council meeting, it's a committee of the whole. I don't think we need a motion to adjourn, so I'm gonna end the meeting and thank everybody for coming and thank everybody for watching.